Hello, I'm Josephine Burton and welcome back to the Dash Arts podcast, seeing the world through an artistic lens. And particularly welcome back to our mini-series on our production Dido's Bar. Dido's Bar is Dash Arts' big show for autumn 2022, a retelling of Virgil's Aeneid through the eyes of contemporary migration today. This week, I'm actually recording this intro in Finland, where our composer for Dido's Bar is based, working on the production, whilst Rachel has kindly been threading this podcast together. I'll leave you with Rachel to give more of an insight into our journey to production so far, and how you might be able to be part of its ongoing development through the Big Give Christmas campaign.
Thank you so much, Josephine. So this week I'm talking to writer Hattie Naylor, composer Marouf Majidi, and of course our own artistic director Josephine Burton, about their dynamic as a creative trio and how they got started. We'll also be talking about, and sharing clips from, the incredible workshops that Dash have put together with Hattie and Marouf to complement Dido's Bar and the messages surrounding it. But first, Josephine has some exciting news to share.
I have to tell you, before we start at all, is Hattie, you have a very, very early birthday present.
Oh, fantastic! Sorry, did that hurt people's ears? Sorry. I just went red.
We heard yesterday that we got the Arts Council grant for Dido's Bar, which is amazing because that's the last bit of funding that we need to make Dido's Bar happen. It's really amazing news.
Marouf, isn't that fantastic?
Congratulations. Amazing.
Amazing.
Well
so
done,
we
guys.
definitely now have a show.
Ray! I'm on my own tonight, but that doesn't stop me from drinking bubbly wine. Never
Please drink bubbly wine. Or that what's the drink that we had, Marouf, in the sauna in Finland?
Yes, yeah, the Lonkero.
We will not drink some Lonkero, but we'll imagine that we're drinking Lonkero.
Yeah, find it.
Anyway, I wanted to share that with you. I thought that would be a nice piece of news to have.
Thank you.
Have for us all.
That's lovely.
I know we're picking up this podcast from the last one, which was like a lovely journey into my meeting Marouf and working with Marouf, I suppose, up until our kind of crazy trip to the Highlands of Scotland. But the kind of the third musketeer and the real partner of, a really true partner in crime for us both is bringing Hattie into the mix, which happened shortly after that trip to Scotland. So I definitely feel like the three of us have kind of taken on this. We are the triumvirate of Dido's Bar. So it's been, I guess, that the journey of the process and the update from where we were on the podcast to where we are now is really about Hattie joining our gang and the amazing collaboration that has come out of having a brilliant writer with us to explore what this story will look like.
So when did you join the project, Hattie? And you'd already done an adaptation of the Aeneid. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I think Josephine hadn't come across that, and I wouldn't have, that's not a criticism remotely. I did a version of it for Radio 3, so what I'm trying to say is that I didn't get the commission because of that. Though it was nominated for, I can't remember which award it was now, but it was nominated. I can't remember it probably because we didn't get it, but it was nominated for the Radio Audio Award, and it was working with a different composer, somebody called Will Gregory, who's the other half of Golfrap. So it was quite a lovely thing to work on, but it was we stuck very much to the text. It was Fagel's translation that we worked from.
So when did you join the project?
I'm not sure, Josephine. Was it 2 years ago? Because COVID, of course, stopped everything, and we all did a few workshops on Zoom, which was interesting. Josephine, do you know when we started talking?
I remember we had our first conversation. It was March 2020, so it was really just before the pandemic hit us all. We were still, we brought you in early March, and we're starting to think about going to Finland that summer. So it was definitely before the pandemic hit that we met. But the conversations began. We decided to sort of start conversations on Zoom. So I think we probably started them in April, and it was fairly obvious to us quite quickly that we weren't going to get to Finland. So then we started thinking about different ways of working.
And of course, we didn't meet for at least a year and a bit, I think. Is that right, Josephine? We just
Yes.
talked on Zoom.
So when did the three of you first meet? Marouf, was that when you came over here?
Yeah. That was the first time was last summer, for the first time. So in Helsinki when we were in Maiden Festival.
Oh wow, okay.
Which actually quite felt unreal after having so many, Zoom conversations and developing, and I working on Hattie's text, and after probably 1.5 years we met for the first time last summer.
And Hattie, what was that like for you, sort of doing all of that online and then sort of jumping in person? Because I remember I met you over the Zoom at the R&D, last December?
Yes, so initially I wasn't in the room and Marouf came over and they did a workshop with me on Zoom, with me dipping in. And then the same thing happened the other way around with Marouf on Zoom and me in the room. And so when we met, it was I feel it was almost emotional because you'd got to know somebody over a year and a half and you'd never actually physically been in the same room. It must have been the same for lots of organisations and arts organisations across the country. Unfortunately, if I can say this, Marouf and Josephine, we all seem to get on.
Yes. Yeah, there is always the risk. That's true. You don't know someone, doesn't matter how good he or she is, but there is also the personal and the human connection. So,
and likewise for me, it just worked.
It did just work. And I think one of the reasons why it worked was because on the first night we sort of started working on the Monday and we all arrived on Sunday night. And we had a kind of an initial conversation and talked about the plan for the week. And then we were given the key to the sauna. And we kind of, I think Marouf went and got alcohol, and we ended up having like a proper Finnish summer party on the lake in this beautiful place with the sauna. And it was this brilliant icebreaker. It wasn't cold, I'm happy to say, but it was a brilliant way to start the process because there was something about the informality of getting to know each other, jumping in the lake, like the proper sauna experience. I think was totally fantastic, and it bonded us as a group before we'd even started.
Yes, I'd agree with that. The Japanese have a party at the beginning of a venture. They don't necessarily have a party, I believe, at the end. It's the very beginning, and it felt like that. And I think that's a really wonderful way to begin an exploration with a group of people. It was a wonderful night. And then we had many other wonderful nights, I think, right the way through our stay there.
So how do you start writing for this? Sort of take me through how that would even work. You're sat in the room and you're listening to the music that they're coming up with, or do you give them the sort of skeletons of the writing you've already done and then music comes from that?
Normally, you would, and different composers work different ways. But normally, you produce a text first. That's what you do with the libretto. And I would say this is closer to a libretto than it is to lyrics. Actually, it's sitting in between the two. What I call lyrics is a very sort of beaty, and they have to hit certain beats and they have to hit certain rhymes. Whereas words for an opera, for a libretto, is a libretto for an opera. They don't have to be so constructed and they don't have to be so limited. And of course, working with this extraordinary composer, a musician which is Marouf, and the other wonderful artists that we had in the room in Finland, you're able to sort of write in what I feel a much more expansive way when you're constructing song. And it's really inspiring to write in the room. I really love writing in the room. It's one of my favourite things to do. I never find it hard. I think I don't know how many songs did we create that week?
The week in Finland was phenomenal. It was about 7 songs, 6 or 7.
Yeah, it was very productive. Unbelievable. And I just add to what Hattie was saying. Usually easiest way, you get the text, and then you reflect on the text as a composer, in any way, melodically, harmonically, rhythmically. You reflect on what you hear, what you see, what you understand from the text. The process what we have had actually so far is more of a communicational way, huh? So it's not only, okay, you get the text and you compose for it. It's more like how you understand the text and how the thing that I'm going to compose, how it's related to the previous things, how it is also related to the actors or the other artists who are in the room. So the outcome might be something different, totally differently, if there are different people in the room.
I think it's really that's a really good point, Marouf. And I think, interestingly, when we've made a virtue out of it not all being in the same place simultaneously, but it's also helped us really evolve a working process as a 3, so that by the time we all got together to Finland,
we were really clear about the right way of working, and that was amazing. So the first time, we were learning how to deal with, how to experience the text kind of in our midst as we were all musicians learning to working together. And then it was quite different. The text was evolving in the room, and Marouf wasn't there the second time. So the third time when we were together in Finland, we had this kind of beautiful kind of chemistry that sometimes Hattie would be writing in her room, and we would be thinking about a song or working on a music or thinking about the text, working a previous text and honing the kind of the dramatic, how it would feel and sound in the room. And then this Hattie would emerge and there'd be a bit more text, and we'd explore that scene and start thinking about what that music could sound like and what that scene would feel like. And then Hattie sometimes would be in the room writing with us. But there were lovely moments when Hattie would get to the end of that scene, and Hattie would be like, Hattie would turn around to me and say, "Oh, well, I'll write another scene now. What's going to happen in this next scene?" So then we'd work out where the story would be going next, based on what we know of the Aeneid and our version of retelling that story in our bar and with our musicians. Hattie would then go off and write the next scene inspired by the conversation we'd just had and the musical landscape that we were creating. So it was really it really evolved very beautifully. I think as a dynamic between the three of us, we really kind of developed a language that would help kind of nurture the right environment for the show.
I totally agree. Absolutely. It was very, very easy. And it isn't always easy. And that's to do with the quality of the people that were in the room.
We were given this space to work and food, and we were really nurtured wonderfully by the Maidan Festival and Global Art Point. It was just a phenomenal opportunity. But the other thing that happened that week was that part of the conditions for doing the residency was that we'd need to do a form of sharing at the end of it, which is pretty normal procedure. But at a certain point, I discovered that people were buying tickets for that sharing. So rather than just provide them with a little, maybe a talk and a couple of songs, we actually had to give the audience something, which really pushed us all. So that actually we were having this incredibly intense creative time, but at a certain point, we needed to find a way to kind of make the work shareable publicly. And it pushed us to start setting to really work out, to sort of see how we would share this first draft of Act One as a form of performance. So it was suddenly we were teching the production with lighting and sound and working out how to move and blocking the show and very intensively at the same time as writing music. And the team were phenomenal, really, to be up for doing this journey. And of course, then their professional values kicked in at a certain point, and they were like, well, if we're going to perform, we've got to perform it well. So we worked very hard. But that was a big part of the brilliant opportunity of being in Finland, I think, was actually beginning to see how this show would take shape as a performance with an audience, and then performing it with the audience and seeing the audience's response. People were crying, and it wasn't just because they wanted to get out of the room. They were moved by the experience of seeing this work. And that was a phenomenal thing for us to really to be in the midst of the process and to immediately see people's responses to it.
I'm brought into projects to make people cry. This is true. It was funny as well, wasn't it? What I love to help create is what I call all the colours, absolutely every aspect within a piece. And of course, the joy about particularly classics is that you can create all those different variations in a piece. So there are moments that were truly funny, I think, particularly the arguments between the goddesses Juno and Venus. And there are moments that were truly tragic. There's a sort of speech when Aeneas is talking about trying to save his wife. And then, if you know the story, the wife then sort of turns up in the poem as a ghost, and there's a sort of song that comes out of that that's really moving. And it was probably the darkest part, but I think you want the darkest part as well as the lightest part in a piece, and I think we've already really achieved that. It was quite astounding watching the effect. It was only in R&D, bearing in mind that of course to the Finns and the audience predominantly Finns, this is their second language. But it still seemed to have a real impact on them. And, of course, once you experience that, it makes you just so excited about what the project will be when it's finally finished, if it's already in a shape like that already.
Wow. And then, so how much has it changed since then? So you must have, did you feel the sort of pressure of having to get something together? And then has it Is this sort of the script and the music massively changed since then?
Marouf referred to last summer, but I feel like last summer was just minutes ago, really. But we did gather together in October, just a couple of weeks ago, to listen to the script as it currently is, the full script, because we worked on Act 2 last November in London. We did a little bit of work in May in London on some of it, and then we worked on Act 1 in Finland, and we've never actually listened to Act 1 and Act 2 together. So we brought into the room a couple of brilliant actors based in London who were really phenomenally international in their backgrounds and music, and bringing music and theatre, and we spent one day with them reading through the script and listening to some of the songs with some people who've already been with us before, including Laura Hanna, who's attended quite a few of the R&Ds, so knows a bit of the material already, just to see how it sounded, how these pieces that have been created in such different environments could work together as a whole, which was wonderful to see and wonderful to hear. And I'd love to hear Hattie and Marouf's thoughts on how it felt listening to their work as a kind of listening back and listening to it together. But we then have had one amazing day talking about it, and now that we've got this grant, we can go ahead and commission the full script and score to sort of move it into its next stage of the show.
Marouf, how do you feel that the show's sort of like moved on and progressed since then?
It's interesting. Now, I should say that I'm sitting now in my hotel room and looking on this beautiful Mediterranean Sea in South Spain, and this morning I was actually looking at this beautiful, gorgeous blue and green sea, and I was thinking about the journey of Aeneid, probably somewhere, not necessarily here in this city, but it's been going through the same waters, and the same lands, and I was thinking, that I don't know how much of the whole story is true, but anyway, the character that we have, the person who was here 1,000 years ago, and now we retell their story, in our way, and we try, to use what we know from the history, what we know from the Virgil's telling story to us, but also, to, kind of have the full respect to that, but also to make our own story and our own interpretation of that. So each time that I, hear the story, and of course the new retelling of story, what we had a couple of weeks ago in London, I feel that, we're getting closer and closer to the original one. Even though we're making our own, and we change all the time. Now it's happening in Dido's bar. It's related to the refugees, and we're talking about nowadays and Europe, and things that happening in this modern life. But still, I feel that it's in a cycle, and we're getting closer to how he felt, in a way. So all these sessions that we have had, I think it has helped us. It has helped me, to get to know these characters. Of course, the main character, or the whole story is around him, but also the other characters in this world of Dido's, or world of Aeneid, or world of Virgil. So I think all of those shortly have me to understand, all these sessions, to understand more of the character and the story, which is, I think, the central thing in the piece.
So talking about sort of like understanding story and understanding the piece a bit more, as part of Dido's Bar and the process of developing that, you've also been running workshops around London and Oxford. How did those come about? What's the sort of thinking behind those workshops?
When Dido's Bar will come to the UK in 2022 in the autumn, and it will play in London and in various other cities across the UK: Oxford, Portsmouth, Manchester and Leicester. And the piece will live in its communities, and we are very keen that not only will the audiences love the piece, be part of the piece, attend the bar, be part of the world of Dido's bar, but there are lots of opportunities for actually integrating people into the show and guest spots or working in the bar. So and the other part of it is that communities of those places have extraordinary stories. So many of the people within those cities are themselves new arrivals and have themselves lived through experiences like Dido and Aeneas of moving to Europe. So we were really keen that we would find ways to hear those stories, learn from those people, find ways to integrate some of the extraordinary stories that we hear into our show and into the development of the show before we officially kind of commission the script. But also we would find ways to embed the show in the community so that when we finally present the work, it's owned by the communities as well as being for them. So layering that this year was really important to build our audiences, to build engagement with the piece locally. So not only did Hattie and Marouf and I work in London on threading together the text and spending time with actors, but we also ran a series of workshops and gigs in London and in Oxford to kind of lay the groundwork towards next year.
And if I can just add to that, I felt all the time, that it's also kind of we pre-introduced I don't know if that's the word, but pre-introduce the world that we're going to talk about. The world of Middle Eastern, North African music and culture. So that what I had in my mind in the workshops and in the concerts, so was how to introduce to this new world to these people. To just have a small understanding of what we're going to offer them later.
Well, I was there, and I think that it was a huge success, and people were certainly engaged with the singing and the dancing, even if unwillingly at first. They got into it, didn't they? Marouf was able to create incredible and interesting workshops on Middle Eastern music, introducing many of the themes from Dido's bar, giving context on the differences in the style of music and a more Western style of music, and most importantly, creating a fun and inclusive atmosphere where everyone felt able to contribute. This feel is going to be central to the world of Dido's bar, and I wanted to include a few clips from the Oxford workshop for listeners to enjoy.
In the Western world, we see the rhythm linear. So this is how a Western composer and a listener thinks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Where is the first beat? That's the main and most important thing in a Western way of thinking music. Where is the first beat? True? Mm-hmm. All of you who has gone through the Western way of learning music schools, radio, the music, the mainstream, everything is based on the idea of where is the first beat. And it doesn't matter if it's an odd rhythm or a simple rhythm, regular rhythm. So always where is the first beat? In the East and in Africa as well, and South America as well, think the rhythm in this way. You see, the accents could be actually anywhere. So, if we do this in a let's say Western way of thinking, so you think in this way, and that's just a different of thinking, as it was in a microtonality. So a different approach, basically the same, because the approach is different, the feeling is different behind it. So you emphasize different things. So. It's a very old folk song called Shane. Shane is it comb? Shane. Comb
So it says, don't comb your hair so much because my heart is there. My heart has a house in between your hairs. Don't comb it. That's the lyric. Says when you comb that, you will break my heart because you'll break my heart. برگی سویت ای جان برگی سویت ای جان کمتر زن شانه کمتر زن شانه برگی سویت ای جان برگی سویت ای جان کمتر زن شانه کمتر زن شانه چون نرچین و شکنش دارد چون نرچین و شکنش دارد برگی سویت ای جان برگی سویت ای جان کمتر زن شانه کمتر زن شانه چون نرچین و شکنش دارد چون نرچین و شکنش دارد دل من کاشانه دل من کاشانه چون نرچین و شکنش دارد دل من کاشانه چون نرچین و شکنش دارد دل من کاشانه. Okay, perfect.
Hattie, what was your workshop on, and how does it sort of sit into the world of Dido's Bar?
Well, it was on character, really, I think, and a tiny bit on story. One of the hardest things, of course, to do with classics, I think, because character moves so quickly and changes so quickly. When you think about how many characters we see on television and film, as well as theatre now, it's very difficult to create a really rich character. So I did one workshop on that to do with how you construct a really rich character. And the other part of the workshop was story. And Robert McKee, is a great sort of Hollywood guru, says that we all create a sort of narrative inside our head about our own lives. And that's really useful when it comes to telling someone about what you've been through and what has happened to you, that narrative and that narrative construction. And Carl Jung says that it's also tied up with archetypal story, that story sits inside of us. We've all heard stories over and over again, so we have a construct of what a story is and isn't. Historically, a story sort of builds in a 3-act structure, and then once you hit the 3rd act climax, you rush to the end. So it looks like a sort of rectangle, if that makes sense, as regards how you draw one. Though we all sort of know that instinctively, so you get the big, powerful emotion, the biggest, most emotional part of any story is at the end. That's how you also deliver it. We sort of know that is the case, but we haven't actually necessarily thought about it. So I sort of taught through story, really. And of course, again, when it comes to, particularly when you're adapting a poem, which is what this, of course, is, you have to really shape that piece of work, particularly if it's drama, in a specific way to make it work. Otherwise, it is too difficult for us to really absorb the story. The story has to has a specific pattern, I would say, particularly in a Western narrative, which is where we are, because that is something we are so used to. And of all the sort of dramatic techniques out there, structure is the one thing that's the hardest to defy, because we're so used to this pattern in storytelling, the punches at the end. And it's the same with the joke. There's a wonderful magic thing in drama to do with 3. So it's that you set up, you begin the joke, you develop the joke, and then you land it on the 3rd line. It will not laugh. You will not laugh if you land it on the 2nd line. And it's this gorgeous shape that we're used to, and that's called the 3-act structure, which is initially talked about by Aristotle. So that I talked a little bit about that with them, as well as character.
All those things that we sort of instinctively know, but we've got no idea why we know them.
Absolutely. And, and I really do believe, because I teach quite a bit as well, and I really do believe that everyone has the ability to write and create story inside them. You just have to sort of give them the right tools. I sort of believe that really passionately. And it is very interesting when you look back at how you create your own personal narrative about how your life has been so far, which of course is so poignant and important if you've been through a particularly difficult path. If you're amongst the many people that are coming into new countries for the first time, due to war or displacement or economic reasons, that story is particularly important. And to be able to tell that effectively really helps you in the telling of that story on every single level, on I think a psychological level, on as well as how you politically explain to somebody what has happened to you.
Hattie's passion for story and inclusivity in writing is part of what makes working with her so special. We were incredibly lucky to have her running a workshop on story with us. She talked about how to find interesting stories, how to work with your own life experiences, and how to create heroes who interest us, who challenge us, and who are relevant today, which is something that she's also brought to her writing for Dido's Bar. I have a few clips which demonstrate this beautifully.
Now, some people start with ideas, some people start with theme, and some people start with character. I tend to start with ideas. If you find it really difficult to create ideas, to look at ideas, and hopefully that will also come out of this exercise, which we'll look at in a minute, then one of the ways to find really good ideas and really good places is a really undervalued resource. Obviously, there's history and there's music, and there are many places that inspire us. But local newspapers have some of the most incredible stories in. And if you find that you want to write something, you can't find a topic. And my local newspapers, more than broadsheets, it's on broadsheets, everyone knows that news. And I do another exercise where I get a whole class to look at a local newspaper together, and they find stories from that. Sometimes I think it's really hard just to find a story that you want to tell, and that's to do with really engaging with where you are, where you live, but also really going to see everything and reading everything. So I go and see sort of high art stuff as much as I go and watch stacks of television and read lots of history. So you have many choices. So your hero is gay. Your hero is gay. They are a secretary and an estate agent, and they are arrogant and slightly mean. Think about that. This is your hero. This is the person that you're writing the whole of the story about. Okay, you can't use too many negative traits, otherwise you make the character unmanageable. Bearing in mind that we like characters that are really complex to be the main protagonists in a story. We don't really like them simple. We don't like them to be flawless. One, because that means they won't have enough obstacles, but also that tells us nothing about ourselves either, because all of us are sort of multi-faceted as regards our character. The most interesting thing about creating authentic character is the only person that you'll ever know truly is yourself. You'll never know truly the heart of anyone else. The only other people that you'll ever know are the people you create, the people you write about, essentially yours. And the more you get to know somebody, and this is my experience, this might not be yours, the weirder they get. They don't get less weird, they don't get less complicated. They get weirder and weirder and weirder. One of the things about being human is that we all feel that no one understands us anyway. It's part of the human condition. We all feel alone. And part of that is just how strange others are to us, really, when you get close to people. And what you want to do when you're writing characters, first is to create something that really, really reflects that. This is where getting near that. So this is our hero, he's gay, he's a secretary and estate agent. He's arrogant, our hero. He's a bit mean. And maybe he keeps turtles. Isn't he interesting? Or she, let's make it she. Isn't she interesting already? And she's the person that's going to have obstacles. We're going to empathise with her. We're going to make a whole story around her and about the difficulties that she faces.
Josephine, you must be thrilled with the success of the workshop and the gigs that you've done. Do you have anything to add?
It's a joy always to work with them, and I absolutely, my highlights for the last little workshop series, there were so many, often just laughing with Marouf and Hattie, but a couple of like amazing moments where we're sitting down the day after the read through of the text and saying, okay, how did it feel, and what did we think, and where's it going next, and this, and just learning so much from the experience of hearing the work with the actors and understanding where the show needs to go. And there's quite a lot of missing sections, particularly towards the end. Like, we don't quite know yet where the show's going to fit, how it's going to end. And just talking about it, with the text and the music ringing in our ears was really very inspiring, and continues to be. And we are interrupting Hattie this today for the podcast interview while she's actually writing a proposed ending for the show. So we're really in the thick of the writing process at the moment. But the other thing which was amazing was being in the Royal Docks at the Docks Originals Festival, having watched Hattie and Marouf do workshops with communities locally in Newham, and then we had this gig, and the gig was completely brilliant. And as you say, Rachel, I wasn't at the Oxford show, you were. People did dance, and people sung, and they were singing the songs of, like, Kurdish wedding songs, and they were dancing these amazing circle dances. and there wasn't much reticence actually in London. People were just up for like getting up and dancing. Not everybody, but a lot of people were like holding arms in our weird COVID experience with masks on and not with masks on, and some people just dancing by themselves on the other end of the room, but people were really into it. And I turned around to my lovely contact at the Royal Docks, and I was like, this is a taste of Dido's Bar next year. The sheer craziness and complete, like, we were bringing the world to Newham. And someone even turned around and said that to me, I can't believe we've got this in our neighbourhood. And which was like, I turned around to the Royal Docks, I was like, that's the quote you want for the event. But it was joyous and so phenomenal to see. And I got very excited about what will happen next year when we bring the full show to the UK and we make this piece and we bring the world to the UK, and people get to dance and sing and be part of it.
Joyous is the right word. That's exactly how it felt. It was so funny in Oxford. Like, people were a bit like, oh, well, maybe. And Marouf was like, no, it'll be great. It'll be fun. And then, before you know it, everybody's on their feet trying to sing these words and like walking back and forth, and everyone's clapping for them. I mean, it was a really sort of fun and like beautiful sense of community and madness.
It's just been an absolute delight, the whole process so far. And I can't see it not continuing to be an absolute delight to work for Dash Arts and to work with Marouf and the other musicians we had in the room in Finland as well, and all the other actors and actresses we worked with with the readings with Laura and Nandi. And yes, just a delight. And I'm so excited about the next few months.
Thank you so much for taking the time, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Rachel. Of course, you're doing the podcast, but also in Oxford. You did great. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, it was my pleasure. It really was.
Rachel, were you dancing?
Oh, of course.
Oh, good.
Yes, she was the main dancer.
I was dancing, I was singing, I was pretending I knew what was going on. I mean, it was great. Oh, dear.
Lovely.
I want to thank Josephine, Hattie and Marouf for their time on this podcast, as well as Oxford Contemporary Music and Royal Docks for having us with them. And a huge shout out to everyone who came to the workshop and the gigs and contributed fantastically. Dash Arts is a small charity which relies on donations to keep making work, and as such, we are taking part in the Big Gives Christmas Challenge. Although Dido's Bar will have a base in London, we feel it's incredibly important to tour the show, and our current plan is to go to Leicester, Manchester, Oxford and Portsmouth, but we do need your help with this. Donations open at midday on the 30th of November and they close at midday on the 7th of December. So please see our website or visit the Big Give website and search Dash Arts for more details. If you like the Dash Arts podcast, please do like and subscribe. I'm Rachel Head, and this week I'm going to leave you with Marouf's final song at his Oxford gig, a beautiful and fitting song for Dido's Bar about not feeling like you're in charge of your own fate. Thank you.
سفري لناويم بچوك شارع ما تلوم بو گذری لناويم شر شارع ما تلوم بو گذری لناويم شر شارع
شر شارع